Montreal Grand Prix. What do we say about Lando? You could be my age. You think there are no more coincidences, no accidents, no luck. You make your own reality. You just need to believe. But I'm not sure Lando believes he can be champion. That's the big story. Are you ready to go, son?
I am ready to go.
Hello, welcome to Hard Compound, the American take on Formula One with your hosts Brian and Patrick. Just finished with race 10, Canadian Grand Prix, Montreal, one of North America's great cities. Patrick, son, let's get to your analysis and your top 5.
All right, well, this was a bit of a weird race, I guess. I think a lot of unexpected, maybe, events or outcomes occurred. Clearly, we get a Lando DNF, as you mentioned. And that was just, maybe he doesn't believe, maybe he believes too much. And that's what caused him to run straight in the back of his teammate. I don't know. But ultimately, I think this was a big weekend for Mercedes. And I'm not sure that it was really a big weekend for anybody else. Maybe a nice comeback drive from Max after kind of a ridiculous last couple of weeks. But we had Ferrari failing to show up again. McLaren just looked completely out of sorts, ultimately kind of leading, I think, Lando to make an improper challenge, maybe, on his teammate Oscar. And, the rest of the pack is just kind of a little far off. Yuki looks uncomfortable still at Red Bull. Aston is being wrangled by Fernando to a second straight points finish, which is nice to see. I think he raced really well, but, they don't look particularly impressive. Williams, one of the teams we've been kind of surprised and excited by, was quite poor this weekend. Not particularly fast, and then compounded by just terrible management, basically, strategy management. So really just kind of an odd weekend altogether, and we got a lot of results that I didn't really expect, and we'll get to that in the across the line. But
why don't you give me your top 5 drivers, do you think, for this past week?
Okay, well, I guess we have to start at the top. George Russell. Everyone seemed to struggle except for Mercedes this weekend and Max, and George came out on top. He took pole, great qualifying session, looked confident, comfortable, really never looked under duress during the whole race, and ended up winning, obviously by a small margin because of the safety car, but really at no point did we think he was not going to win.
Yeah, it was his weekend.
Then, I have to go with his teammate, Kimi. He has struggled the last few races, and this car this week was obviously the best car, the quickest, and he did his job, only beaten by his teammate and Max Verstappen. What else do you want an 18-year-old kid to do?
Right. And Max had no business getting that Red Bull into P2.
Right.
That was pretty amazing.
Right. So, I was going to put him up in my top 3 as well. Continually, he outperforms maybe that car or team, and is just always impressive. I guess if he's not being childish, then he is one of the best, if not the best, all-time driver. And, that kind of came through this weekend, I think. Then I'm going to have to go with some older gentlemen. I'm going to go with Hulkenberg.
Nice.
Got that Sauber to, I believe, a second straight points finish again. So that's pretty nice from him. Clearly, the upgrades that they brought to Spain are working well enough. And Hulkenberg has, in the first race of the season, he outscored what Sauber did last year. But, he continues to show he's very capable. So that was good to see.
He's having one of the best years. He's definitely overperforming.
Yeah, for sure. And then another old guy that, again, got a second straight points finish. I'm going to go with Fernando Alonso. I think outperforming that car again, I know they also had some updates to his vehicle over the last few races, but he's just looked so much more comfortable and like he's having so much more fun just being anywhere near points. And so he deserves to be up there. He's driving well still at 43. So
yeah, I don't take exception to any of this. I think you might be able to throw in Ocon there in place of Alonso, but either one of those. So you have, for the Canadian Grand Prix, your top five were George, Kimi, both with Mercedes, Max at Red Bull, Hulkenberg, and then Alonso. Now, the actual driver standings after 10 races. Man, it's hard to believe. 2 more races before we're even at the halfway point. But Oscar now, firmly in command at 198. His teammate Lando Norris at 176. Now, that's almost an entire victory, but there are so many races left. Lando needs less than 2 points a weekend on his teammate Oscar if he's going to go for the champion. Because right now, it sure looks like it's going to be McLaren. So Oscar at 198, his teammate Lando Norris at 176. Max Verstappen, 155.
Hey, he's closer to Lando than Lando is to Oscar. That's kind of insane.
Yeah, that is. I didn't even notice that. That's true.
By a point,
By
but
a point, still. In that car. George Russell, it was a good weekend for him. He's now 136, and whereas his teammate Kimi Antonelli, less than half of that at 63.
Oof.
Yeah. Good weekend for Kimi Antonelli this weekend, but it had been a poor month prior. And then in fifth, Charles Leclerc, Ferrari, with Lewis Hamilton only at 79. So I'm kind of a little bit shocked at Lando's crash. It was fully self-inflicted, in particular because I noticed at the start, Oscar pulled up a little bit. He wasn't as aggressive, and I think that was because he realizes he's fighting for the championship. He's got a car that can win the championship, and there's no need to be hyper aggressive, especially on that first lap, that first turn. But then Lando goes and kind of, spoils it all. I'm just, I don't know. Maybe he was being too eager, too aggressive, thought he could take on his teammate, thought he saw a gap, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of weird. This ended up being a big day for Oscar, I guess, in terms of his battle with Lando. But it did look like Oscar was showing his patience like Max has done over the last several seasons when it was clear he was going to win or had a faster car or just didn't need to force anything. On the first lap, especially that first turn, Oscar gets bogged down a little bit behind the Red Bull. And then, Kimi is able to come around the outside, just has kind of a better drive. But ultimately, Oscar didn't really fight it too much. He would rather get, 12 points instead of 0.
Right.
And Lando just looked too impatient. He obviously knew he was faster than Oscar coming down to the end of the race there and wanted to do whatever he could to get by him. But sometimes you have to weigh the pros and cons, the consequences, right? And he didn't seem like he did that at all. It was just, I must get past Oscar no matter what. And I think dropping 2 points to your teammate who you're fighting for the championship with versus dropping 12, that's a big let-off. That's a big difference there. So,
I mean, every man knows you're in a car, you're driving, you're going fast, you're doing something stupid. You want to get past somebody, you want to get around them, you're going to do something stupid. But yeah, like I said, he's less than 2 points a weekend he needs to make up on Oscar, but that was costly. No, we talked about Max. He somehow got the Red Bull in the second. Yuki, man, that second Red Bull seat is humbling. This was, I think, Yuki's 100th race, and it was definitely one to forget. That was tough. And Lance Stroll came back. You'll notice that whenever Lance Stroll is out, it's always too late and then too soon to bring in a reserve driver. And I think we all know why Lance Stroll is not going to ever allow a reserve driver to get that seat, because whoever it is will show him up.
I guess, first of all, it's tough. That Red Bull seat is tough to be in, as we've seen over the last 2-3 years. 3 drivers have tried and seemingly failed to not match Max Verstappen, because I'm not sure that anyone can, but score points. Scoring points should be doable in a Red Bull, and it's not. So obviously that means the drivers should be or need to be doing better. But also I think that team, for whatever reason, is struggling. And ultimately, I know we talk up Christian Horner quite a bit, but he needs to get them on the right track. You can't be relying on Max's greatness for everything. The team needs to start putting in the work. And so, I think they need to figure something out there at Red Bull. But then again, I guess to the point of Yuki, this was a race to forget. Unfortunately, it seems like he's had a lot of those throughout his 100-race career. And, Lance Stroll simply is forgettable most of the time. So,
yeah, both of those drivers familiar with Honda, but yeah, Lance Stroll and Yuki, it's hard to envision them coming back next year. And if they do, I view them as taking up 2 spots that somebody else, that other driver should have. So, all right, team standings now. Although I did want to mention that Alonso with his mustache, I thought that was worth 5 points. He had the nice thick mustache going. I like that.
Stash.
All right, team standings. McLaren. I don't know. Do we think it's done? Do we think this is over? 374, and then P2 Mercedes 199.
Yeah, they could have one driver finish for the rest of the season and have this thing wrapped up. So I don't see... Mercedes look good. I just think McLaren has been so dominant already, and I don't think every race weekend will be the same as it was this weekend between those 2 teams. Yeah. And likely could easily be flip-flopped most places where McLaren is the stronger team, as they have been throughout this season. And they have a better driver pairing. Right now, Lando and Oscar is still a better driver pairing than George and Antonelli. I think George has really stepped up this season. I think he's just driving so well. But having a rookie that's still kind of figuring it out, obviously did really well this weekend, Antonelli, but it's just too much to make up, I think.
Yeah, but it is pretty remarkable because McLaren definitely has a better driver pairing, but 175 points. And you think that, it's McLaren Mercedes. They're using the Mercedes power unit. It's just pretty remarkable what they've done, how much more they've been able to extract out of that car. So McLaren 374, Mercedes at 199, Ferrari at 183. They've now usurped Red Bull at 162. Max has 155 of those 162 points. That's... I don't know what to say. Even if you say, well, they built their car around Max. I'm like, these are F1 drivers. I don't know how he's getting 155 points out of that car. Nobody else can drive it. And then a distant 5th is Williams. So I hadn't thought much about the turmoil going on inside Ferrari, but I watched the 24-hour Le Mans this week. Ferrari did very well, and they seem to always do very well. They won, actually. Meanwhile, this Ferrari team that just missed out on the constructors last year just seems to be floundering. And then Lewis Hamilton made a public statement expressing his support for team principal Fred Vasseur, and I thought, that can't be good. That's, is Fred's job in jeopardy?
Yeah, I have to imagine Ferrari is the New York Yankees, New York Knicks, whatever New York sports team you want to think. And when you're those teams, ownership is fickle, and management, I guess, is fickle. And I have to imagine they set potentially unrealistic expectations, but Ferrari isn't even achieving realistic expectations, I think, so far this season. And Lewis Hamilton, I think, is not living up to my expectations yet. And Leclerc, a bright young driver, still young, I guess, he's doing fine, but should be doing much better. And I think that comes down to the team ultimately. And yeah, I have to imagine that your massive new driver signing, basically going out and announcing his support for the team principal, was basically necessary in order to keep Vasseur around for potentially the remainder of the season. I think there's no other real reason for that to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not so sure. After seeing what Ferrari did again in Le Mans and seeing just how consistently underperforming they've been, I don't know. I'm not so sure that Vasseur makes it even to the end of the year. Who do you have as the biggest winner for the Canadian Grand Prix?
Well, let's see. I gotta go with maybe Toto. Mercedes obviously getting the win with George, another podium with Antonelli.
His first.
And the driver that Toto was high on, brought in to replace the traitorous Lewis Hamilton. Meanwhile, Hamilton struggles, comes in, sixth, I think, in this race. And then Red Bull lodging multiple protests after the race, and Toto can just kind of, and they were mostly bogus, right? And Toto can just sit back and just sort of laugh a little bit, and then kind of throw shots at the F1 movie premiere afterwards. He was having a good weekend.
He was, and the team leading is using his power unit, but I mean, he owns the team, so. Though I didn't actually think Red Bull's protests were unjustified. I mean, the rules are the rules, but I was glad they came out that there were no changes. So, all right.
Right. I mean, I don't necessarily think it was.
There should have been no penalty, and there wasn't. Right. So they got the right. Yes. So I don't blame.
They can do it, which is fine. I just think everybody knew it wasn't going to come to anything. Yeah. So,
yeah. So who do you have as the biggest loser of the Canadian Grand Prix?
I mean, for me, this one seems like an obvious Lando Norris kind of deal. He's seems like he's struggling to find his form a little bit. He obviously didn't qualify particularly well, was behind his teammate the whole race on kind of a split strategy. And then, finally gets up there. He's on better tires. He's faster at the end of the race. And does something stupid and out of control and just blows it. And immediately he knew it. He on the radio was saying, "Oh wow, that was stupid. Shouldn't have done that." And so I think he is in his head. I think Oscar's in his head. I don't know if Lando wins another race this season. I mean, what is going on?
Yeah, and I mean, kudos to Oscar Piastri, but he does not strike me as peerless. He's a solid driver in the best car. Lando should be not handily beating him. I think beating him. And to me, this is mental. Okay, switching to the soft compound, I want to talk about old people. The old men. All right. First off, Fernando Alonso, like I said, he deserves 5 points just for the mustache. F1 statistician Daniel Valenti posted, and I was actually shocked by this stat, that in the ground effect era, Fernando Alonso has 5 front row starts. Lewis Hamilton, only 3.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean, I double checked. So, I don't know. But, I mean, man's in his 40s. He's in a middling car. Do we think he's coming back next year, Patrick?
I don't know. I hope so. I just like watching Fernando. But he's 42 43 now, right?
42, I think, something like that. 42, 43.
So another year, you're driving in F1 cars that I'm pretty sure any normal person would have back problems for the rest of their life. They drove it around a track one time.
All right.
So
maybe he'll go to Alpine Renault, finish out his career at Renault, which is, now Alpine, but I don't know. I hope he's back. He's not actually said anything that would lead me to think he's leaving, other than, as we've said, he's just so damn old. So another old guy, no longer in F1, he's on the outskirts, Gunther Steiner. Haas, this was their 200th Grand Prix, the Canadian Grand Prix. 200, pretty remarkable. And it's like, Gunther got Gene Haas to pony up the money, and he put together a team from scratch at exactly the right time. F1 was kind of sinking. This was before Drive to Survive, before Liberty Media took it over. And he kept that team afloat, Gunther did. I don't know how he did it. Right time. It was pretty remarkable. And, during COVID, especially, everybody was watching Drive to Survive. And that sort of introduced, certainly America, to F1. And, everybody's like, oh, look at this. Fast cars, glamorous, athletes that are well paid, travel the world, cameras on them all the time. But really, the star of Drive to Survive, I think, was Gunther Steiner. And I just think we've undervalued him. He acted the clown at times, but, he built a team that's now going to have 200-plus Grand Prix.
That's fair. I think Gunther Steiner deserves praise for how he was able to build that team up. And I think there were a lot of kind of quirks that he sort of had to exploit because of how small the team is, how little money they have had. And they have fallen prey to some maybe unsavory situations. The Mazepins and the
Russian barrel money
thing, the
that
energy drink shit that happened, being basically, what was it, last year, 2 years ago, they were basically held hostage in the Netherlands because they had to pay up, I don't know, whatever it was. I think it was to Girl Collie, but yeah, just kind of ridiculous things.
It ruined Mick Schumacher's F1 career.
Yeah. So I think that there's some maybe not so good things that have gone on, but yes, he did a remarkable job of kind of scrapping together an F1 team at a time when everything was sort of starting to go back up. And we're getting now to this point where, you add an F1 team, that'll be $1.5 billion. At no point did he ever have anything close to that. So that was good. I think when he left the team, that was the right time to leave the team. It needed to go in a different direction, and they've started to, I think. So that's good to see.
Now, speaking of old dudes, I'm an old dude. I'm going to beat this dead horse. My idea for an F1 Champions League. So we talked about Lewis Hamilton. He's getting up there in age, and he's not performing at his best. Fernando Alonso's in his 40s. But this past weekend, we saw the 24-hour Le Mans, and it was remarkable the number of former F1 drivers there. Giovinazzi, Stoffel Van Dorn, Mick Schumacher, I already mentioned. Kevin Magnussen was there. I think Jensen, but I'm not sure now that I think about it. I don't know if Jensen was in it this year. But, Robert Kubica, who won, which made me also think someone pointed this out because George won this weekend in Canada. Kubica won Le Mans, and they were on the same team. Claire Williams gave them both. Well, she gave George his start, and she brought back Kubica when there was no real rational reason for doing that. That was just the goodness of her heart. And what a remarkable story. So thank you, Claire Williams. But it took the long way around. I don't know. I think my idea of a Champions League, an F1 Champions League could work. Maybe just 10 races, let's say just Europe and America, or just Europe and the Middle East. And it's Lewis, and it's Magnussen, and it's Alonso. And we can do this on a Saturday or a Friday. Kubica can come back. I don't know. We have Champions Leagues. We have these senior leagues in golf. In all these sports, I don't know. I think this could work.
I think it could. And quite frankly, speaking of the F1 movie that's premiering, it's based on some old retired F1 guy that's lured back into the sport. And I'm like, well, if you just make a different sport altogether and let them race there, and
I haven't seen the movie, but how did they lure him? It's like, hey, would you like millions of dollars to race in F1? I mean, that would lure me. You know, I wonder how they lured him. Anyway, so I don't know. I like the idea. Now, speaking of the Canadian Grand Prix, I heard they just signed contract extension with F1. They're going to be on the calendar for like 10 more years. This was announced soon after F1 announced we're no longer going to have Imola, at least not anytime soon. And I just think fans, especially longtime fans, are just going to have to get used to the fact that some of these old tracks are just going to go away. But when they announced the 10-year contract extension with Canada, they also said, at least for next year, and I think Ramadan may play a part in this, so maybe it's not going to be every year, but at least for next year, it's going to be held at the same day and about the same time as the Indy 500. And I'm like, you know what? That just means no one in America will watch it because everyone in America will be watching the Indy 500.
Yeah, I mean, it's stupid. That weekend is like the holy grail weekend for racing fans. I mean,
yeah, Monaco. Yeah,
first.
Typically Monaco. Yep.
And then in the afternoon, well, here in the afternoon, you get the Indy 500. And I mean, what is better than that? Full day of racing. You get Monaco F1, you get the Indy 500. Who's going to go and say, oh, it's the Canadian GP and Indy 500? This is what we imagine when we think of the best of any motorsport. I don't know. It's just weird to me.
Well, I also wonder, like, they still haven't signed a big media TV deal in America. And I'm just wondering, like, are they just shooting themselves in the foot? So they screwed over the great Monaco Indy weekend, at least for next year. Red Bull got a young driver to get an exception. So he's going to get his, I forget his name, but he's 17. So they're going to give him his super license. And it's like they always are prepared to give European F2 and F3 drivers these super license exceptions, it seemed like. Meanwhile, you can be driving an Indy for 20 years or NASCAR for 20 years. And FIA is like, no, sorry, we can't give you. I mean, they're wanting American money, but still seem to engage in these behaviors where it's like you're sort of biased against America. I don't know. I think they're costing themselves billions of dollars here.
Right. I mean, yeah, I don't know what the potential monetary outcome of that is, but it is frustrating that FIA governed motorsporting leagues, I guess we'll call them, have a much easier entry into Formula One, right? IndyCar and NASCAR and these other maybe more North American motorsport series don't kind of get the same number of super license points per win or, podium, that kind of thing, which is frustrating. I mean, the IndyCar series guaranteed is a more difficult series to win podium in than F2 is. It simply is.
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is they'd rather give these Euro series an easier time of jumping up the ranks into F1. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, well, oh, you want to get into F1? Well, come to Europe and now race in these series and you can find your way into the sport. Whereas, oh, you're racing professionally in America. Well, that doesn't help us out at all. You're not racing in an FIA governed series. You're not in the locale that we want you to be in. So we're not really going to deal with you.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes, though, is this costing them money? I mean, who knows? Apple CEO Tim Cook was at the F1 movie premiere. Apple funded the movie. Maybe they're going to make a play for streaming rights for F1 races, so the F1 will get billions more than they ever have before. But I just think with Apple, with all the big tech sponsors from the U.S., with the big U.S. company sponsorship deals they've signed recently, like Disney, Pepsi, I don't know. I think there's still some inherent bias there. Across the line, that's our segment where we predict the top 5 for the next race. The next race is in 2 weeks in Austria, start of a long stretch in Europe. In Across the Line, if our driver does get in the top 5, we get a point. If we get him in the exact right finishing position, we get 3 points. Patrick, what are the current standings of Across the Line? Do you have them?
I do. So prior to this race, the standings were pretty close. You were at 35 to my 31. So just a 4-point spread there. And this weekend was not particularly kind to either of us.
Orlando. Or Lewis. Or the groundhog.
Yeah. Let's see. So top 5 ended up being in the race. The top 5 was Russell, Verstappen, Antonelli, Piastri, Leclerc. So your top 5 picks for the Canadian GP were Piastri, Norris, Alonso, Russell, Gasly. So you got 1 point each for Oscar and George, neither one in the correct position. My top 5 was Leclerc, Hamilton, Albon, Verstappen, Hadjar. So I got 1 point each for Leclerc and Verstappen. So that goes to 37 to 33, still a 4-point.
All right. Well, so last year at Austria, it was George, Oscar, Carlos. That was when Max and Lando had the first coming together, I believe. So they were out of it. And both Haas finished in the top 10, coincidentally. All right. Well, who goes first?
I believe you go first.
Oh, I go first. Well, George won this week. He won Austria last year. I'm going with George to continue the Russell/Mercedes hot streak.
George. Okay. Well, I am going to go with then the man with the championship lead, Oscar Piastri. And then P2, let's go with the current champion, Max Verstappen.
Nice. I am going to say, I'm not going to go with Lando, but I think Ferrari will get their shit together, at least for a race. I'm going Charles and Lewis.
Ooh. Wow. Then I'm going to go Kimi.
Ooh.
Lando.
Ooh. All right. Let's see then. I will take the 2 A's, Alonso and Albon.
Ooh, nice. Alonso, Albon. That'll be, if Williams can get it together again, that'd be good. Let's see. You have Russell, Leclerc, Hamilton, Alonso, Albon, Piastri, Verstappen. This is tough. I'm going to go with Carlos Sainz then, Albon's teammate.
Oh, nice. So, for Austria 2025, I have George, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Alex Albon, and you've got Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, Kimi Antonelli, Lando Norris, and Carlos Sainz. Any crazy predictions, Patrick?
Okay, my crazy prediction. Well, so this weekend's podium, Russell, Verstappen, Antonelli, had an average age of just 24 years old, which is quite young.
Wow.
I feel like. But further back in the field, we had 6, 7, 8, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Nico Hulkenberg. So my crazy prediction is, at some point this season, those 3 will be on the podium together, which I believe will be an average age of 40 years old.
Oh, that's awesome. Speaking of old dudes, that's awesome. I love that prediction. Mine is not that fun. So I started this by saying, we build our own reality. All we need is to believe it. Lando does not seem to believe it. My crazy prediction is that McLaren will stick by Lando, and they will somehow, in multiple races this year, sabotage Oscar. Terrible pit stops, terrible strategy. They will do something, but it will not be enough, and that Oscar will be champion.
Wow.
All right. I want to thank you all for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. It is much appreciated. And I want to close with this message from the new Pope, an American. In a society marked by solitude, where radical individualism has shifted the emphasis from us to me, resulting in a deficit of real concern for others, it is sport, especially team sport, that teaches the value of cooperating, working together, and sharing. Good message. That's it for Hard Compound. We are lights out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
You just finished listening to Hard Compound, recorded in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and around the world.